Welcome to Leaders and Legends, the podcast focused on leadership and clinical trial execution. I'm your host, Patty Leuchten, CEO of Diligent Pharma. In each episode, we'll get to know the individuals who are driving change and influencing the direction of our industry. Whether you're a seasoned executive yourself, an emerging leader, or simply passionate about clinical trials like I am, join us as we discuss our industry's most pressing challenges, the future of clinical trials, and hear insights and advice from the leaders who are moving our industry forward. Coleen, thank you so much for carving out time to do this with me.
My pleasure, Patty. Thanks for having me.
So we've known each other for a really long time, but what I really love about this podcast is I get to ask questions of people who I've known for a while that I just want to learn more about. So I'm super excited for our conversation. And I guess I want to start in the beginning. So would love to hear where you grew up, where you went to college, and how you got into the clinical trial space.
Sure, happy to. The short answer is by accident and a lot of luck. I grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and went to college at the University of Pittsburgh and majored in biology and minored in psychology. When I graduated, the economy was in a bit of a depressed space. There weren't a lot of jobs. I really had no idea what I wanted to do for what's next. And I had worked my whole way through college at the local university hospital. It was the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, and it was such a great experience to just be part of something so vibrant and such an ecosystem. And I eventually then moved into laboratory work. I thought biology, science, let's get out of the hospital and let's get into the lab. I really didn't like it. It wasn't for me. I missed the pace. I missed the interaction, and then I really wasn't sure what to do. I got really lucky, Patty. Clinical trials found me. I wound up finding and falling into a job as a clinical research associate at Warner Lambert Park Davis, which very shortly after me joining became Pfizer, and spent about 20 years there.
You know what? It's so funny because I didn't know that you worked in the lab and then started as a CRA. I did too. I was in the lab, not loving it, wanting to get out in the world, and so we have that in common. And I do remember when we met at Pfizer, it was 15 years ago. I was super nervous to meet you, and I had known John Hubbard. John and I had been talking about this idea of the Avoca Quality Consortium and Pfizer being the first member, first sponsor. And John loved the idea, but he said, you got to convince Coleen. If Coleen's not in, I'm not in. And so I can't even tell you how nervous I was for that meeting, but that was 15 years ago. And can't thank you enough for supporting that idea and that vision all those years ago.
You should know he was just as supportive of you, what Avoca was doing, and I was just as eager to meet you.
Well, that's so nice. Well, I remember back then meeting you and then starting to work together with the Quality Consortium. And what really struck me with you is that you seem to have this very big sort of strategic vision. And I was meeting a lot of quality professionals and quality leaders at the time because of our research and the work we were doing at Avoca. But you were the very first person that I met who was equating quality and culture and talking about how to establish a culture of quality. And it just wasn't common parlance back then. Am I right about that? I wasn't even hearing the phrase quality management all that much. It was very reactive. It wasn't sort of this proactive approach to quality.
You know, it's interesting because it wasn't something even normal for me to think about originally. I really believed if you built it in, everything would be fine. Do you have the right processes? Do you have the right people? Do you know what's expected of you? I believed if you did that, everything was going to be just great. And I had to do that to help Pfizer and John Hubbard remediate the warning letter that we had at the time.
Yes.
And it's all
Yeah.
very public. So this is all above board conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But it was hard and we fixed so much. And as proud of we were of what we fixed, it didn't feel good. It felt difficult. It felt like a hard thing to come to work. And that's when I really started to believe you have to be intentional and planful about culture. And culture is just as important as process in any large transformational change. And you really have to treat them equally and not as an afterthought. So we applied just as much rigor to how we think about culture as we did process. And Patty, you and I have had lots of conversations about things that are intangible or esoteric, or to use a word you used with me before, a little woo woo. That's how I actually felt a little bit about the culture space. So we really stepped back and thought, what is it? And I learned that it's really what you see. Do you see people acting with a culture of quality? What you hear. Are people choosing quality and compliance in their decision making? Do you feel it? As you look around, do you really feel that people are passionate and caring about the patient and how we're really achieving the right medicines for them? So, really took that tangible, hard look to create this culture of quality.
It's very wise and it's not common, I would say, even all these years later. When I had my conversation with John as part of this podcast, I don't know if you listened to it, but he did mention you and the work that you did together at Pfizer. And one of the things he said that he's just very proud of is that it created this foundation that endured. And he gave you a lot of credit for that, Colleen. But I wonder if we could sort of unpack this a little bit more and really talk about the role of leadership in all of this. And how do you think about that? Like, what is the role of the C-suite, the leadership team in establishing cultures that are focused on quality and, as you described, integrity and compliance?
That's an excellent question. And I think it's one that gets missed so often. It really starts at the top. Tone at the top is everything for how a company will operate. Starts with the board, the CEO, and the C suite. And everything that's done by that group to set that tone is what carries forth into the company. Leaders have to create that environment where you can put the patient first, but you know how. What do I mean by that? Do you have a psychologically safe environment that people can speak up and say things aren't working? Do you have systems and processes that prevent and control for errors? Do you have controls and feedback loops? And last but not least, do you really have the opportunity to escalate when you know something's wrong? Do you know how to do that? And leaders are accountable
Mm,
for putting all of that in place. And when I say leaders, I don't mean leaders with quality or compliance in their title. I mean all leaders. That's really how that gets created.
mm. It's so interesting. And, you know, bringing up that it starts also with the board. And I mean, that is so true. And I think, I mean, I've been to a number of board meetings. I'm on a number of boards, and I think that it does get lost sometimes at the board level that what is sort of our North Star? Why are we doing what we are doing? Because sometimes so much of the conversation in board meetings is in the weeds financials and growth and, which is important, of course, but it could actually be transformational if what you said actually becomes more of the norm at the board level, at the C-suite, at the leadership team level, at the functional leader level. And I don't know if there's that much intentionality or awareness of how important this is.
I That's a fair statement. I think there's a tremendous amount of intentionality and awareness for any company who's ever had any problems. That's usually
Mm,
what happens that makes the light bulb go
the
off and
catalyst.
makes great change. I've been really fortunate to work with some great CEOs and great leaders who really know what sponsorship looks like. I have a current CEO who actually stands in front of the entire company and says, "Everybody raise your hand in the quality and compliance team." And he does this at the very first town hall he joins, and he's brand new. And everybody on my team raises their hand, the compliance team raises their hand. Everybody's so excited and proud that he wants to know who they are. And he very gently says, "You all work in quality and compliance." And that's
I love
actually what
that.
it takes. Is it's not a check and a balance. It's a way of operating and it's a way of making decisions. So you really do look for that. And those
Yeah.
leaders usually assure with the board that there are mechanisms to have the right discussions. And that would be something that I would really encourage everyone to do is make sure you
Mm.
have line of sight all the way from the top all the way to the bottom.
It's so important, and, as I said, I don't think that it's sort of just the way the world works today, with many, many companies, and I wonder if we could talk about why that is. What are some of the challenges to operating in this kind of holistic and intentional way where at every level there's this awareness and focus on quality and integrity and ethics and sort of the big picture. Why isn't it not uh, more the norm?
I had the answer to that, it would be the norm. I think there's so many
Mm-hmm.
confounding factors in the world right
Yeah.
now that make it very hard to be intentional. If you look at the way our industry is changing, the way the world is changing, the pressures are coming from all the different places. It brings you to the trade offs that companies are having to make between cost, quality, and speed. Without that true focus and intention and that driving
Mm-hmm.
force of integrity, it's really difficult to have a framework that assures it. No one anywhere goes to work and says, "Today I'd like to do a bad job. Today I would
So
like
true.
to have a problem in my manufacturing. I don't care about the data in the clinical trial." Not one person. Everyone shows up and
Right.
wants to do a
Right.
good job. Companies need to
Mm-hmm.
create the environment, the systems, the processes, and the culture to equip people so that they can.
How important do you think it is for leaders who are on sort of the same leadership team to sort of be in sync? Because and I think about, I have a small company, but we have a leadership team that is comprised of many different personalities, and they bring their different communication styles and their different strengths, but we're pretty small company. At the larger company level, of course, we're looking across geographies, and you have, all these different functions and potential silos. So cohesiveness at the leadership team level, I think, is probably very important. But how do you sort of think about that?
That's a really great question. And there's so many examples I want to pull from, but I want to maybe get to what I think is the crux, at least for me. Diversity of opinion is super important when you're trying to grow quickly, when you're trying to transform something. Getting all the opinions in is really important to get to the right answer. Being in sync with where you're trying to go is essential. But then the piece that I worry falls down between it is acting. You can be very much in
Mm,
sync, but not take the action. You can get all the opinions, but not take the action. And for me, it is actually making sure that the diversity, the in syncness then lead to actually acting. And to me, that's what is going to differentiate it is taking that action.
hmm. Right. The execution, right? Because I think that, you know, at the leadership team level, strategy is really fun. I think
Absolutely.
having these kind of conversations about how to create a better future, that's where the juice is. It's really fun and interesting. But
Right.
where the rubber meets the road is in execution, and I think you're right. It's sometimes where things fall down. And I wanna go back to something that you said earlier about the catalyst, at Pfizer for the warning letter, because I do remember those days. I remember the conversations with John and others, and I think that there's nothing like a warning letter that can wake you up to, moving forward in a different way. But if you sort of look at it from another perspective, are there sort of like opportunities that could spur on these best practices, let's say, if companies and leaders got really clear on what's in it for them, what's in it for the company, so that you don't need the crisis, you don't need
That's right.
the burning platform.
100%. If companies are able to see that executing with high integrity, quality standards, compliance levels is really a strategic enabler of the bottom line, it to me really gets people synced up and
Hmm.
pulling in the same direction. So it's really get away from the burning platform of fixing what happened in the past and try to move to a mindset that it's actually essential and synergistic for growth. And I get really excited when I talk to new companies who want to build it in from the very beginning and actually ask, how do we do this? How do we make it just as important from day one as we would when
Yeah.
we go to launch?
Hmm. I mean, that's the best situation to be able to think about it from day one. And in some ways, it's an incredibly creative opportunity to be able to um, put all the pieces together. And there's a real art to it because it's strategy, but you're also thinking about the people and the personalities and the execution strategies and working from right to left to understand what your goals are. Um, I think so often, though, companies have gotten into a situation where they have acquired a bunch of different organizations. They have grown very, very quickly. They're doing the best they can to just keep up with the pressures that they're under, getting trials off the ground, and then something happens. There's a some sort of emergency or crisis, or at least maybe even a glimpse that trouble is down the road. So that's probably more common, especially even with the mid-sized biotech companies. It's very hard to sort of slow down and really um, implement such a you know a functional and intentional infrastructure. So if we think about that, every company is sort of in a different place with this, and many are sort of in the midst of having to try to figure this out. Colleen, where does one start? Like, how do you sort of dive into this whole um, sort of journey around driving a culture of quality?
Yeah, no, It's an important question because every company is going to start at a different place depending on what they're dealing with strategically as well as on the day to day. One of the first things that's usually very helpful to do is to try to get a baseline. Where are you? Some sort of assessment. Um, at several companies now, we've partnered with Gartner to do an actual survey to actually find out what do we know about the culture of quality. They take a very scientific approach to it, which is great. So you're going to get really hard data so you can start to understand where might you have pockets to improve. And the other thing is it starts to do a second unintended positive consequence, which is just start to feed colleagues that this matters, that we're tracking, that they have an opportunity to speak. So I usually recommend starting with some sort of assessment, and then you can sort of get to what you're looking at. The building blocks often come back to the same thing to really drive the integrity piece. And I think what's important to know and to keep in mind is it's no longer something that is just a nice to have. Health authorities, regulators are requiring this. They're actually requiring people to have a positive culture of quality. DOJ looks for tone at the top. You actually see financial implications to companies. So taking this seriously and intentionally really does, in my opinion, leapfrog a company and enable them to continue to cover a lot of ground. So start by measuring, start by understanding where you are, and then start to really ask yourself, does your company value or values line up with what you're trying to do? Are you able to pull the thread and make it part of everything you do? Do your job descriptions include reference? Everywhere you look, are you seeing the connectivity to how you expect colleagues to operate? Can you look at your structure and your pyramid of how you operate and see at the very top how you want it to happen? Can you see integrity at the top? And that's how you really do start.
That is so smart, and it's almost like you laid out a playbook here, and as you know, I'm a big fan of, using quantitative and qualitative data
Yeah.
to really as a start for understanding a situation, and I think what you said is really interesting because we were talking about the catalysts of, warning letters, but are there, positive things that could spur leaders on? But having the impetus of this being a regulatory requirement starts to change the picture a bit,
It
right?
really does. It really does.
Yeah. Now, I want to just sort of pull back the lens a little bit to talk about the clinical trials space and what you see where you are sitting right now in terms of what we're facing as some of our biggest challenges in clinical trial execution.
It's a great question. And I think it's one on a lot of people's mind. If you just pull back and you just think about what we're reading in the newspapers, what we're hearing on social media, we're at this inflection point where science and technology are at such a point that it's moving at lightning speed. Tremendous pressures economically, tremendous pressures from pricing. All of that comes together to be a number of layers on clinical trials. When you start to look at how it's all going to come together, and we've got these great new technologies, AI, ML. You probably saw Lilly's announcement today, what they're doing, such an amazing opportunity that companies are all trying to figure out. Data integrity is going to be at the core of us getting it right. All of these new things provide tremendous opportunity and tremendous risk. So we're going to have to be super planful to make sure we're controlling for the risk. The data are at regulatory level, and we really are using all of these wonderful things to continue to accelerate medicines to patients. And clinical trials are the mechanism that that's all going to get done. So all of those inputs are going to drive us there. And then we're going to need the right controls to get us there with data integrity, patient safety, regulatory compliance, and product quality.
Yeah, that's so well put. I think that what you said is really important about just tremendous opportunity, but then
Tremendous.
yeah, but perceived risk. And just been having conversations with leaders lately around just challenges with adopting new ways of working, adopting technology. I do think that we have to figure it out as an industry.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we see it dated on a daily basis. I mean, since you're on our Diligent board, you know the work that we're doing here at Diligent. And I think that the challenge that companies have with adopting a new way of working, a platform, technology, many of the people that we speak to are kind of anxious and willing to try new things. But some organizations just aren't innovation ready. They don't know how to assess new tech. And I wonder how we sort of break through. It's almost like we need a breakthrough strategy with this. This seems like the John Hubbard podcast because I'm going to, talk about John again, but he says something that I really liked when I spoke to him about how all of this innovation, tech adoption, it's not really possible if you don't have quality as a foundation. So it just ties in to all the things we've been talking about um, since we started this conversation. But do you sort of have a sense for just this whole dynamic of the interest and the willingness, but almost the reticence around tech adoption? Like, what's that about? Is it fear that the regulators aren't going to like what companies are doing? What are your thoughts about that?
It's a great question. Maybe I'll address first your quote from John. John's statement about in order to innovate, in order to try new tech, you have to have a really strong foundation of quality. Couldn't agree more with that. And that's where the cultural component also comes in, because you want to know that people have the right mindset to raise their hand if something new isn't working, the right mindset to really assure that we are getting a quality output. You want
Yeah,
people at all levels in the company to be able to make decisions with quality in mind and not to just continue because it's a goal. You want them to
right.
understand how to make quality based decisions with high integrity. So I think that's really great. I think the reticence is it's new, it's expensive, not everybody has the skills. In order to
Yes.
actually do it, you have
Hmm.
to be intentional, make a plan, finance the plan, and everything comes at trade offs. So you really need someone, in my opinion, with a strong vision and commitment to make it happen. And I don't think every company has that luxury. Some have to be
Yeah.
pioneers, some have to be early adopters. Some people have to wait until it's in mass market and affordable, replicable, etc. So I think this
Very true.
whole dynamism makes it really hard to just jump in and go.
It's so true. And I've been sort of giving this a lot of thought within our organization, and I think that for the work that we're doing, what I've shared with my colleagues is that a lot of companies are not sort of scrambling for the next new tech. They just need their problems solved. They need support. They need to work with a company that is conferring very high value and making their lives easier. And sometimes that is through tech, and sometimes it is through tech enabled services, and sometimes it's just arms and legs that are providing support. And I think that rather than trying to force fit tech, it's almost like the innovators have to get innovative around tech adoption in a way and sort of meet companies and people where they're at And um, and that's, not I mean, we're able to do that because we have SMEs and we have that type of support. Not every SaaS company could do that, but I think that the force fitting isn't working. So there's got to be, and I don't have the answer, but there's got to be something that can help us break through as an industry.
I
Um,
I think you're right, Patty, and I think there's so much going on that makes it difficult as well. Corn Ferry just published an article on job hugging. People are afraid. They're hugging their job. They're keeping their head beneath the
mm,
parapet. They are not trying new things. They are not going out on a limb. They're wanting to make sure they can stay gainfully employed in a market where jobs are decreasing. So I think you've got a lot of market forces at odds with
yes.
each other as opposed to a straight vertical tech problem. Again, I don't think anybody shows up and says, I want old tech. I want to do it the wrong
Yeah.
way. I think
Right.
there's a lot of forces at play.
Yes. And what you said also sort of just brings to mind that in some cases, tech is threatening to people. Like it could be self-preservation in terms, and that's why some individuals might not feel motivated to take
Sure.
on the next new sort of AI tool. Um, so yeah, that's so interesting. Well, Coleen, I could talk to you all day, all evening. This has been really, really great. I think we've covered a lot of ground. And in some ways, I think that there's been this through line because what you said about this idea of employees being willing to raise their hand when there is a quality issue, um, in some ways, if you have that type of culture and environment within an organization, it's it creates the right sort of foundation for adopting new ways of working because you could try new things. Leaders could actually feel confident that if things aren't working, they're not going to hear about it after there's a problem. They're going to hear about it from the front lines as soon as, there's any trouble, in the picture. And so I think that I want to think more about our conversation, but this whole discussion around creating this foundation of quality, integrity, ethics, it is tied to innovation adoption. And I actually hadn't thought about it like that before. So thank you. Thank you for that. I want to just sort of close by asking you sort of Colleen, what do you do for fun? Like, what do you do to let off steam? You work so hard, you travel, you're on the road a lot. You're a West Coast person working for an East Coast company, so you probably have to get up early in the morning. Um, what can you share with our listeners about what you do for fun?
My wife and I live in Seattle with our three boys, and right now, fun is teaching our 15-year-old how to drive. So that right now is
Ooh.
our focus. And you'd be surprised how much work there is in being a good teacher. Forget about a good parent. There's a lot of work in trying to teach the fundamentals of driving. And we spend a lot of time just enjoying the beautiful scenery out here and long walks with the dog who I'm looking at right now.
It's one of my favorite parts of the country. I love that, where you live is where I used to travel all the time when I was a CRA. So I totally get that. Thank you so much, Coleen, for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation. And thank you for all your support over many, many years. I really appreciate you so much.
Oh, Patty, back at you. It's truly my pleasure.